With that, members, and I'm going to ask council to help me with this because last night, so what we want to do is move the House File 9. And so last night, it was midnight, so I'm a little hazy, but I think and please come forward, Representative Richardson.
Not vote for me.
Yeah, what is the procedural? So we'll, all right. So,
9, 7, and 1.
so then the chair will move. The chair will move to bring House File 9 off the table. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion prevails. House File 9 is now before us. So members, we were at the stage of amendments. We had completed the public testimony. We had questions. And what's left for us to do then is to consider the amendments before us, debate those, and then move toward this committee's final action relative to House File 9. So let's begin with, in order, Amendment A2. Is there someone offering the A2 amendment?
Mr. Chair, so moved.
Representative Lucero moves the A2 amendment. Representative Lucero.
The members and, Mr. Chair and members, the A2 amendment seeks to recognize that when a person might be suffering depression, as one example, or whatever other reason a confiscation order might be issued, that, as we heard in testimony last night, the most effective way to keep that person or others safe is to remove the person from committing danger rather than attempt to remove dangerous or the firearm from the person. But nevertheless, since that's the way that this bill is written, firearms are not the only thing that can create harm to oneself or another. So this seeks to add to that list motor vehicles, knives, axes, ropes, baseball bats, golf clubs, other sporting equipment, tools, household chemicals, antifreeze, or any other item that might be used as a weapon to create or pose a danger to oneself or another. So members, I look forward to your support.
Very well. Are there any questions? Representative Richardson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at this amendment through the lens of suicide prevention, as you had just mentioned, we know that guns are the most deadly choice in suicide attempts, and other methods of suicide are not as lethal. If you're thinking about guns in particular, firearms are going to be fatal 85% of the time. And we also know that individuals who survive a suicide attempt, 90% of them don't go on to die by suicide. And so really understanding here that guns are going to definitely be the most fatal form, and we know that from a public health perspective. The other piece that I would add as well related to the 72-hour hold piece is we are currently in a real crisis situation with our mental health services, and there are no beds available. So individuals, even if they meet those needs, may not be able to get access to a bed in a timely manner. If you're thinking about it through the lens of a household member who may be in fear of their safety because of domestic assault, we know when we're thinking about intimate partner violence, especially against women, over 55% of the deaths of women are killed as part of intimate partner violence are killed with firearms. So again, that's the most lethal method. So based upon that, I would recommend no on the amendment.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to request a roll call.
Representative Dean?
Mr. Chair?
I'd like to request a roll call.
Very well. Roll call has been called. I do have Representative Johnson next. It's your amendment. Are you responding to this?
I am.
Why don't I give you a time to do that, but I'll just take this in order. Representative Johnson.
Mr. Chair, members, I'm going to speak in support of this amendment. I have unfortunately had the displeasure of going to many suicides. The vast majority of the suicides I've been to have not been with firearms. They've been with the chemicals, they've been with antifreeze, they've been with knives, ropes, plastic bags. And the one that struck me the worst and the most shocking one I ever went to was a suicide involving a motor vehicle. The person, we ended up finding the note in the car, literally drove down the road till he saw a semi coming and veered directly in front of that semi, severely injuring the semi driver as well. And I believe we should do everything we can to remove the ability to a person commit suicide. So I speak in favor of this bill,
Thank you.
or amendment, I should say.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the point that I also want to bring up is there's a news article from BBC from November 5th of 2018, so not too far back, that crimes involving blades, knives, and sharp objects are on the rise. In fact, there's been a 16% increase in Britain in the previous year of these objects and the harm that they're creating to others, crimes involving these. And so I think if the bill author is serious about wanting to prevent the risk and reduce the risk, this is a very serious amendment. And I would also then just draw members' attention's recollection back to what County Attorney Freeman testimony was yesterday, that if it can do any improvement, if the bill referring to HF 8 and 9 can make any improvement, that in and of itself is a justifiable reason. So the bill author's comments here that firearms, suicide by firearm being the largest, which I think is in dispute, being the largest, and therefore we should discount other methods, that's not a good rationale. So to be in accordance with, I think, the intent of the bill author, we should adopt this amendment.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just note that the leading cause of suicide is in fact firearms by any information that I'm aware of, and we can certainly debate that if we'd like. Another time, Representative Lucero. I'll just point out that we do not have an epidemic compared to the rest of the world in these other areas. It is true that motor vehicles, we had a staggeringly high rate, and through a lot of public health efforts over decades, that rate was brought down. This is part of making that same effort when it comes to firearms, or the same approach, same mentality. We don't have that with these other things that are listed. You've referenced what's happening in Britain. That's really good. We're looking to other countries as well and realizing they have a far lower rate. I think this is an important step to take on the bill, and we don't have this in these other areas, and so I don't see that there'd be the need for it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very well. The clerk will take the roll.
Chair Mariani,
No.
Christensen,
No.
Considine,
No.
Dean,
No.
Edelson,
No.
Croswell,
Yes.
Howard,
No.
Johnson,
Yes.
Lesh, Long,
No.
Lucero,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Moeller,
No.
Nash,
Yes.
O'Neill. Yes. Pinto,
No.
Poston,
Yes.
going back to the roll call. Lesh.
6, 10, 7. Very well. On a vote of 7 ayes and 9 nays, the motion does not prevail. We have House File A3. Is anyone offering House File A3?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Representative Lucero moves House File, or, I'm sorry, it's not House File. Is anyone moving the A3 amendment? Maybe we should look up House File 3 to see what that is. Representative Lucero moves the amendment A3. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would draw members' attention to the bill as amended, lines 13.8 through, well, Section 9, Subdivision 2. In this section, a law enforcement agency shall be immune from civil or criminal liability for any damage or deterioration of firearms, ammunition, or weapons stored or transported pursuant to 624.7165. And to me, that is shocking that we would deprive somebody of their constitutional rights. And according to other lines, the minimum, if an order is granted, is, it's on line 8.29, not less than 6 months, up to 2 years, if there, unless there's an extension granted. That if something happens, government, it is the responsibility of government. Somebody has been forcefully denied their constitutional rights to have firearms stored involuntarily, and if damage of any kind occurs, government absolutely is responsible. They should not be held immune from liability due to damage. So, members, I would encourage support for the A3 amendment.
Representative Richardson.
Mr. Chair, looking at the liability provision of the statute, it currently provides that if there's recklessness or gross negligence or intentional misconduct, that would not be covered. So the statute would require that law enforcement is not acting in a reckless way. So I would recommend no.
Very well. Any
Mr.
further
Chair?
discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Representative Lucero.
I would ask for a roll call, and then I do have a question for the bill author.
Roll call has been asked for. Representative Lucero.
For the bill author, then, can you define recklessness, gross negligence, and intentional misconduct?
I would ask,
Representative Richardson.
Mr. Chair, I would ask Representative Pinto if he might be.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hate to do a handoff. I'm looking over Mr. Devo, who may be a better source. I mean, I will simply note, members, we talked about negligence versus gross negligence at another hearing, and simply note that there's it seems to me, members and Representative Richardson, that what this is setting up is that, and what folks would imagine is that we would want to hold law enforcement agency liable if it acts in a reckless way, in a grossly negligent way, certainly it's acting in an intentional way. Beyond that, we want to make sure, as we do in other conduct of agencies, that without that kind of behavior, that we would have, that there would not be, to not have liability in that case. But there may be more of a definition to provide. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think that is it. Representative Lucero.
Mr. Chair, well, that was not a satisfactory answer whatsoever by the bill author or Representative Pinto. So I would ask for a clear definition of recklessness, gross negligence, and intentional misconduct. And if I heard Representative Pinto correctly, it sounds like there's at least a definition for negligence and gross negligence. And I would want to know what those definitions are, but then the other two as well.
Is that a question for our legal counsel then, perhaps?
Whoever can answer counsel, yes.
Very well. Mr. Deeb.
Mr. Chair, Representative Lucero, members, I would have to prepare a memo with that information to provide an accurate answer. It's in case law as well as the application. So I think in this case, it would require litigation to determine whether they didn't meet the standard that's imposed or proposed to be established for the care and maintenance of the weapons.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Deeb. Representative Lucero.
Mr. Chair, it would seem to me that at a minimum, the bill author should be prepared to be able to answer this. This is the language in the bill. And so, again, that's very frustrating that the bill author cannot answer how she has put language in here, the definitions. So maybe for Representative Pinto, if he's willing to yield, could you at least define for us, based on your experience, the difference between negligence and gross negligence?
Representative Pinto, and then members will, there is a roll call on this, and we'll take a vote on the.
Mr. Chair, if I could jump in here.
Representative Dean.
I've been in committee meetings for the past 7 years, and I've never heard a committee member ask another committee member
to yield to answer to a question. This seems very beyond the scope of what we do in committee hearings, and I would just ask the chair to consider that.
Chair Dean, thank you. We did have Representative Richardson call on Representative Pintle for advice, so I'm just trying to stay in an equal footing, and then perhaps I should not have allowed that at that point. But let's have Representative Pintle's thoughts on this, and then, members, I want to move to a vote on the amendment. Representative Pintle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Lucero, my understanding in looking at this is we're talking about a significant failure to exercise due care. And it seems to me that Minnesotans would agree. I'm looking at Representative Lesh to some sense of that. I guess what I note is that I think for Minnesotans, the thought would be that we certainly would want to have, if there is some recklessness, some way in which there's this significant failure, that there be liability, and then beyond that, to recognize that, as is true in other actions of law enforcement, that we're going to hold law enforcement to that standard, that if they're going to be acting in a way that is it fails to comply and has that significant failure, that this would kick in at that point. I as you know, Mr. Diebel didn't have that language at hand. I don't myself, but certainly have that sense, and would offer that to you.
And I'll wrap it up, Mr. Chair.
Representative Lucero.
And I appreciate Representative Pinto. I didn't mean to call on you unexpectedly, but it was only because of that, of Representative Richardson having done so. So then, essentially, members, what we're hearing then is that we are going to permit, under the current language, government to act with negligence. That would be permissible, and then the person would have no ability to recourse. If government acted negligently with their private property. It is only until at least gross negligence was reached. And so that, to me, members, that should be very shocking, and I would hope that members would vote in support of the A3 amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Johnson.
Mr. Chair, Representative Richardson, I've served a lot of domestic abuse restraining orders, and in those orders that many times we've been given orders by the judge to pick up the firearms. This language is not in those orders, in that part of the statute. In your bill with the liability for damage, exemption for liability. If you're going to put that language in a bill like this, do you think it should also be in the statutes to protect the sheriff's office from damaged firearms in the domestic assault case?
Representative Richardson, I'll provide some latitude here. We're wandering off of the bill before us. Representative Richardson.
Mr. Chair, there is another stop for this bill, judiciary, and we anticipate that there are going to be some changes between then and now, and so that would provide an opportunity to look at that further.
Members, if we don't finish this soon, we will be back here later to finish this bill. We had a pretty good understanding last night when I was speaking with my colleagues across the aisle that we would move expeditiously today, and so I'm calling on all of us to honor that agreement that we had among ourselves informally. Chair Lesh, are you not on?
I'm passing,
All
Mr.
right,
Chair.
very well. With that, the roll call being called, the clerk will take the roll.
Chair Mariani,
No.
Christensen. Considine,
No.
Dean,
No.
Edelson,
No.
Grossel,
Yes.
Howard,
No.
Johnson. Yes. Lesh. No. Long,
No.
Lucero,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Moeller,
No.
Nash,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Pinto,
No.
Holston,
Yes.
10-7. Very well. At a vote of 7 ayes and 10 nays, the motion does not prevail. We have the A4 amendment. Representative Lucero, are you moving that as well?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the A4.
Oh, you guys switched up. Representative Nash moves the A4.
Always a hanging curve, Mr. Chair, and I would request a roll call on this amendment.
And a roll call has been requested.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, we've had a conversation around the action of law enforcement agents in this particular confiscation or storage of the firearms, and this amendment seeks to provide some assurance to the gun owner who may have their property inventoried and stored. And I'm going to use myself as as an example. I have a number of firearms that are of quite high value. If a firearm comes back damaged, the value is decimated. And I think that law enforcement agencies, particularly sheriffs, they are very close to people. They don't want to be seen as an agent of damage to these guns because some of them, as one of the testifiers mentioned last night, they're being passed down through family, as was the gun I mentioned of mine. So I think in order to do that, you know, there should be an addition in here of some things. Inventory of the confiscated item, a photograph of each firearm with a high-resolution imaging equipment, a receipt to the respondent, and that these items be stored separated by owner in a secure climate-controlled room. I think that anybody who understands the impact of dampness or weather on a firearm, it's profound. Rust can happen if it's not stored carefully and properly. And I think that what should happen if this bill were to become law, and again, I hope it doesn't, but if this were to happen, that we should take those owners' valuable property into consideration. And Mr. Chair, again, I renew my motion and ask for the roll call.
Very well. There is an amendment to the amendment. Representative Mulder, I believe you're going to offer the A11 amendment?
That's correct. So moved.
Very well. Representative Mulder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, okay. So this amendment would basically mean that a law enforcement agency that receives a firearm would be required to take reasonable steps to avoid damage to the firearm during storage. Law enforcement is very used to handling evidence, and I think it's fine to just say take reasonable steps, and they're not going to be just throwing these guns in some sort of bucket or not taking care of them. I don't think we need to outline specifically what it is they have to do. I think reasonable steps takes care of those concerns.
Very well.
Mr. Chair,
Discussion, Representative.
to the amendment, Mr. Chair, I have been, I've toured some of our law enforcement as a friendly tour, and Representative Johnson and I talked about this. And I've talked about it with several sheriffs, some evidence lockers in various places around the state are quite small. They are not going to be able to handle a large number of firearms being stored. And, you know, obviously nobody's going to put a gun in a bucket, but they could put it in an old locker that is going to scratch the finish on a gun. That, I believe, is not something that we want to force on our sheriffs. And as a result, I would urge a no vote on your amendment, because you're now saying that you're going to release anybody from responsibility, and you're saying, oh, well, it's okay, we'll just put it in a bucket, or it's going to be okay. That's not okay. They need to take proper care, and to do that, they need to hand back to the gun owner the same number of guns they got in the same condition that they went in, and I would urge a no vote on this amendment to the amendment.
Very well. Members, are we ready for a vote?
I would call, Mr. Chair, I would move for a roll call on my amendment to the amendment, please.
Roll call has been asked for. The clerk will take the roll.
Chair Mariani,
Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Lucero, I wasn't looking up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make it quick. I was just going to speak against the amendment to the amendment, A11, because as we saw in the previous vote, that reasonable steps could be taken, but as long as they didn't reach the threshold of gross negligence, then it would be permissible. But as long as they stayed at the level of negligence, they still wouldn't be held liable. So I would speak against the amendment to the amendment.
Very well, the clerk will take the roll.
Chair Mariani,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Stein,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Edelson,
Yes.
Grasso, Howard. Yes. Johnson,
No.
Lesh. Lon,
Yes.
Lucero,
No.
Miller,
No.
Moeller,
Yes.
Nash,
Nope.
O'Neill. No. Pinto,
Yes.
Holston.
No.
Very well. On a vote of 10 ayes and 7 nays, the amendment to the amendment does prevail. We now have the amendment before us. The roll call has been asked
Mr.
for.
Chair. Well, so you've amended the amendment to make it toothless, and you're going to put sheriffs and law enforcement agents in a tough spot, and you're going to put another elected official in a tough spot in the sheriffs in our 87 counties. So I hope you're pleased with that, and I'm now going to withdraw my amendment, Mr. Chair.
Representative Nash withdraws the A4 amendment as amended. We have the A6 amendment. Is someone offering the A6 amendment? Representative Grasso?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Representative Grasso offers the A6 amendment. Representative Grasso.
A7.
A6.
A6.
There's an A6. There's an A6.
Representative Grasso.
Are we all on the same sheet of music now? Okay. Representative Pistol. To the A6 amendment, Mr. Chair, some of the discussion last night was around 72-hour holds and such, and I was a little bit taken back when our county attorney that was testifying and our chief that was testifying were starting to pull away from using the 72-hour hold, rather using using the method that's involved in this bill, where they would have the slip from the courts, to the petition from the courts, to go and seize the weaponry, but leave the individual behind, the individual in crisis, as it was stated by our author. And it just it fell on me that I don't like to make a diagnosis or make an evaluation of somebody that I'm not educated. I don't have that type of education. I don't know whether they should be put back out in the public, but as a deputy sheriff, I would bring somebody in crisis to the emergency room and have medical personnel, somebody more qualified than myself, talk to them, see how they're doing, and if they sent them back home, then I figured it was a better assessment than I could ever give them. So with this amendment, Mr. Chair, I'd like to, the Commissioner of Public Safety, Extreme Risk Protection Order Study Report,
Representative Grasso, we're about at the 5-minute mark before we got to go, so.
I gotta make sure I have the right one here. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Well, it's good, but we got to keep moving.
Oh, no, I got them mixed up here. I apologize. I
I'm
apologize.
as tired as you are.
I'll back up here. That was the A9, and that is my fault, sir.
Representative Grasso, are you still moving the A6 amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
We could vote. Yeah. All in favor? Right, all right. Why don't we take a vote? We'll keep moving. All in favor of the A6 amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion does not prevail. Members, the last amendment, the A7 amendment, is someone offering the A7 amendment?
That is my amendment.
Very
That's
well.
the one I was.
And we already heard an explanation, so we can vote. Representative Grasso, quickly, please.
If the court, the A7 amendment if the court issues an emergency extreme protection order, I would ask that the court also order a 72-hour medical evaluation pursuant to 253B and issue an order for law enforcement to detain and transport the respondent to a secure mental health facility immediately.
Very well. Representative Long, I believe you have an amendment to the amendment.
I do. I'd like to move the A10 amendment to the amendment.
Representative Long moves the amendment to the amendment, the A10 amendment. Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As County Attorney Freeman testified yesterday, taking away somebody's liberty is a higher bar than extreme risk protection order, and we should use that with great care. I don't believe that this should be triggering action of taking away liberty, and so I would ask that we move my amendment.
Very well. All in favor of the A10 amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion prevails.
Mr. Chair?
Representative Grosso, to the A7 amendment as amended.
Mr. Chair, at this point, I'll withdraw the amendment.
Very well. Representative Grosso withdraws the A7 amendment. Members, we are before the bill. I do want to share that NABI did send us a memo, so please read that in terms of their thoughts on House File 9. And we're going to take a vote on action on House File 9. And Representative Johnson?
Mr. Chair, members, I have a lot of heartburn with this bill. There's a lot of problems, a lot of lack of due process, so it has a lot of concern. One thing, our side of the aisle brought up some amendments, some of them a little different, like taking away your car and knives and guns, but that was to prove a point. It was to prove a very significant point, that this bill does nothing to help the person in crisis. That's what we need to do. We need to help the person in crisis. I've also talked to some friends of mine all across the state in the law enforcement community. They have the same concerns. But they're the ones that are going to have to go in and confront these people in crisis to remove their firearms and their constitutional right. They're concerned about it. I've talked to my sheriffs in my community. They're concerned they do not have any room left in their facilities for firearms. And they don't have climate control rooms to provide the proper storage of these firearms. Most of them there are full, they're stacked up, leaning against each other, and they're getting sued daily for damage. Or not daily, but they're regularly getting sued for any damage. I know because my department has been sued more than once for that issue. Yes, there's some liability, but if they rust, that's not covered. They could call that gross negligence. They can get sued. So with that, I'm going to ask everybody not to support this bill because it does not do what it's intended to do. It's hurting people and not helping the people it's designed to help.
Mr. Chair,
I would also like a roll call.
there we go.
Roll call has been asked for and will be taken. Chair Lish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't say much throughout the hearings, or anything actually throughout the hearings yesterday and today, but I did want to say that I have been listening intently as well as to the comments that have been made. And it struck me by the comments that were made last night and through email that we got that these bills were a slap in the face to law-abiding gun owners. The argument was made that because criminals don't obey laws, that these bills or these laws wouldn't be worth the paper that they were written on. That's a direct quote. And I just want to point out how dumb of an argument that is. Members, you know, the people of Minnesota are not really dumb. I think they can get laws most of the time, but keep in mind that that's an argument against having any criminal laws whatsoever. Criminals don't obey them, so don't make laws. I mean, seriously? Like, who came up with that? And I'm not accusing the local folks, the good local folks of doing that, because I know that that's, I think, probably carved into marble above the main doors of the NRA somewhere that was paid for by whoever was dumb enough to give them money over the last 20 years. But the fact is.
Mr. Chair.
that You've got.
Mr. Chair.
I'm in the middle of.
Mr.
like,
Chair, we're
I
now
shut up
dealing
for a
in
long time.
personalities, so I would urge you to recommend to Representative Lesh that he avoid personalities.
Does the NRA have a personality? I don't know. It's not a person.
Representative
It's
Nash
an
and Representative
organization, so.
Lesh, let's make sure that we keep to the topic before us. Representative Lesh.
Will do. I looked up a few of the people who made these statements about being law-abiding gun owners. And the statement was that these are, criminals are the ones that we should be targeting. And I only looked up a handful of them. And the handful that I did look up had criminal records. So what am I to think of that? What am I to think of people saying, you got to punish the criminals? Don't punish law-abiding gun owners. And I look them up on Mincis, and they had criminal records. Now, these are not major crimes, okay? These are, criminal traffic crimes, disorderly conducts, whatever. They're not major. But the fact is, when you lump everyone into one group, and you say that this is a black and white issue, that this is two-dimensional, you get yourself stuck on that same two-dimensional line. And then this is not to discount the testimony of these citizens. I take their words and I take them seriously, but I say this to highlight the absurdity of the hyperbole to which this entire debate has descended. So despite the hyperventilating that this is a simple black and white issue, that it takes good guys and bad guys, and if we just focus on the bad guys, we'd solve this problem. It's a disservice to us. It's a disservice to the debate among the citizens of Minnesota of what we can do and what we should do. So I would point out, Mr. Chair, that I do legitimately, I have a few reservations about House File 9 and about the due process restrictions on that. I'm not going to lie. But I would note that this shortcutting of due process is already in existing law when police arrive at a domestic assault scene. It's already there. And I didn't see a single person wearing a yellow button saying support due process when we passed that law. Nor did I see a lot of these people who testified here yesterday come around and defend due process when we had plenty of people in this state who were denied due process routinely for the last 50 years. They didn't come around, but they came around when they think we're denying their due process. So I'm just saying, Mr. Chair, that I think that there would be more credibility on that argument if that happened. That's all I had to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair Lesh. We have Chair Considine, then Representative Mueller, and then we'll finish with Representative Richardson, and we'll take the vote.
Thank you, Chair Mariani. Separate from the 9 is I am really troubled that several of these amendments seem to impugn the integrity and the competence of our law enforcement. I find that real troubling. Thank you.
Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to take us back to why we're doing this again and talk very briefly about the survivors. The very first case I ever worked on, the first trial I worked on, was a murder. And it was a murder of a domestic violence situation in which the defendant told his sister that he planned to kill himself and take someone with him. And he then shot and killed his girlfriend. I've worked on a number of cases involving gun violence, either to commit a sexual assault or murder cases. We've heard from people in our communities. I know Representative Howard heard about 24-year-old Jonathan O'Shaughnessy, who was walking home from a July 4th festival and was gunned down. I've heard about Shelley Joseph Cordell, who is 56 years old, and in the course of her work helping people encountered a woman who had a history of threatening behavior. And she was very scared. There were threatening letters, dead cats began showing up, and every time Shelley called the police, they told her there was nothing they could do until this woman actually heard her. And then that woman went to a gun show, bought a gun for $60 through a private sale with no paperwork or background check, lured Shelley and her attorney to the Hennepin County Government Center, where I work now, and then shot them both and killed Shelley. So I just want to bring this back to the survivors and why I feel like this bill is important and why I'll be voting yes today.
Thank you, Representative Mueller. Representative Richardson.
I think that says it all. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Representative Mueller.
Very well, the clerk will take the roll.
Chair Mariani,
And I'm sorry, let me make sure I'm procedurally being correct here. Representative Pinto, it's your motion that House File 9, as amended, be referred to the Committee on Ways and Means.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Very well, so the motion is before us properly. The clerk will take the roll.
Chair Mariani,
Yes.
Christensen. Yes. Considine,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Edelson,
Yes.
Graffel. Nope. Howard,
Yes.
Johnson. No. Lesh,
Aye.
Long,
Yes.
Lucero,
No.
Miller. Moeller,
Yes.
Nash,
No.
O'Neill. No. Pinto,
Yes.
Poston.
No.
Very well, members, on a vote of 10 ayes and 7 nays, the motion does prevail.